Out there, a lot of information also available on acid and alkali balance. And what people broadly know is that acidity is bad, and people broadly say alkalinity is good. Today though, I want to look at why exactly that is. What exactly does acid mean in the body? I'm going to cover what is acid, and then also some of its damaging effects. Okay, we're also going to look at why people say you need to be alkaline, and exactly how alkaline is an appropriate amount to be. So, really I'm putting this presentation together for practitioners so we can start to implement some of these things in our clinic and get a better understanding of the acid-alkali balance. So let's start with a very simple slide. What is an acid? Well, its definition is a compound that yields hydrogen ions when dissociated in aqueous solution. That's one of the definitions. Any substance that acts as a hydrogen ion donor is another but similar definition. A substance that acts as an electron pair acceptor, that's the Lewis definition. And there's even another definition, of course, which is that acids turn blue litmus red, have a sour taste, and react with bases to form salts. So there's actually a number of different definitions of what an acid is. But overall, and fundamentally, what we look at is the fact that it actually is a compound that will yield hydrogen ions when dissociated in aqueous. And of course that's relevant to us because fundamentally our bodies act as massive chemical factories. So anything that's going to actually yield hydrogen ions can potentially disrupt certain biochemical processes. So, definition of pH. Okay, we hear pH all the time, and we know that pH generally is how people measure is someone or is a substance, acidic or alkaline. So pH is a measure of hydrogen ion concentration, how many hydrogen ions there are. Classified as a measure of acidity or alkalinity of a solution. I think really from a clinical perspective it's quite important to realise that an aqueous solution at 25 degrees centigrade, so making this point here, the temperature when we actually take pH is quite important. If you do not have a device that measures, or it's called an automatic temperature compensation pH unit, and you are taking the pH of a substance that's come out of the fridge at 5 degrees, you'll actually get a skewed pH reading. Just as if we get a substance which perhaps is 37 degrees straight from someone's body, such as urine, and we test it, and it's not an automatic temperature compensating device, we may not have a correct pH. So clinically we do need to be aware of that. And as we said with pH, substances of pH 7 exactly are neutral. Okay, they're not acidic and they're not alkaline. And those substances with a pH greater than 7 is classified as basic or alkaline. And pH really does just stand for potential hydrogen. There's one other thing that you need to be aware of with pH, and that is that pH is a logarithmic number. I remember in high school learning about logarithmic numbers, and I thought, it's a number to the power of 10. Great, who cares? However, it's really relevant when we're measuring pH, because a number to the power of 10 means that if someone's ideal urine pH may be, say, 6.5, and their urinary pH is 5.5, that's actually 10 times more acidic than 6.5. Interestingly, because it's always a number to the power of 10, if someone had a urinary pH of 4.5, their urinary pH would be 100 times more acidic than ideal. So please keep that in mind, that even though we may see a drop of, say, a pH reading of 1 from, say, 6.5 to 5.5, fundamentally it's actually a much more substantial number than simply a drop of 1. So what is normal pH for the body? And here's some really important parts, or really important information. Many functions in the body will only occur efficiently at a specific pH. Enzymes and chemical reactions in the body work best at an optimum pH. A small change in pH can have a profound effect. Muscle contractibility declines, and hormones such as adrenaline and aldosterone increase as the body becomes slightly more acidic. So, the so-called acceptable operating ranges of saliva, pH 6 to pH 7.4. And these are taken from a medical text. However, we'll look a bit later and we'll actually see that possibly the saliva should be below pH 7. We'll talk about that in a few slides. The pH of the heart itself between pH 7 and 7.4. Blood around 7.35 to 7.45. So you notice there's not a big tolerance there in blood. Skeletal muscle needs to be, ideally for optimal function, between pH 6.9 to 7.2. Notice once again, vital organs such as the liver, pH 7.2, no tolerance really there. Organs such as the brain, 7.1. However, urine has a very wide tolerance, and the reason being because urine is in fact a waste product, and it's one of the primary ways that people actually excrete acid from their body. Please also keep in mind that the human body is designed to produce acid and designed to excrete acid. So whereas there's certain schools of thought that say we want to get rid of acid at all costs, the body has built-in buffering systems, so I don't think we need to be absolutely paranoid about acid in the body. We have to understand though that pH is a balance. So how can we measure pH? Well, there's digital pH meters, such as the one you see on the top left there. There's litmus paper, as you see in the middle there. Especially when it comes to urinary pH, there's diagnostic reagents that you see on the bottom of the slide there. Personally, I prefer to use pH meters. I actually find that with litmus paper, I don't get the best pH readings. And what I mean by that, there's nothing wrong with the litmus paper, it's the way I interpret the colours. I had a patient whose parents would take turns in reading his urinary pH, and interestingly, every second day he would be acidic, and every other day he would be alkaline. And funnily enough, his mum would do it one day and his dad would do it another. I don't know if he was really flicking between acid and alkaline on a daily basis, or whether his father had poor colour skills such as myself. So I personally prefer pH meters. I find them more accurate in clinical use. So stages, or what sorts of symptoms do we see in latent acidosis? On this slide, we notice that it talks about some of the most general symptoms you could ever hope to have your patients describe to you. If the patient came in and said, I have sleep disturbances, I feel unwell, and I'm having trouble concentrating, it doesn't really point to any specific illness at all. Okay? So the problem with these clinical signs of latent acidosis is that very often there's not much that actually points specifically to acidosis. It could be a sign and a symptom of anything. This is why I'm saying that clinically it does pay to actually be measuring some of these things, and specifically urinary pH. So let's look at what excess alkalinity causes. Alkalosis will be caused by an excess of bicarbonate in the blood. There's something called hypochloremic alkalosis, and that's caused by an extreme lack or loss of chloride, such as seen really in prolonged vomiting. The kidneys compensate for the chloride loss by conserving bicarbonate. Clinically, as complementary healthcare practitioners, we're not likely to see this. This actually is a medical emergency when we see problems such as this. The other time, though, that we may see is we may see mild forms, and usually that indicates there is some level of kidney dysfunction which needs to be evaluated by a competent practitioner and then secondarily addressed. And sometimes we'll actually see that a hypochloremic alkalosis is caused by a kidney's reaction to an extreme lack or loss of potassium. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Urine pH. This is one of the things we're talking about to evaluate pH in the body. Because what does it do? It shows us how much acid the body is dumping or excreting. As I mentioned earlier, remember the temperature of a urine sample can affect its pH reading. Importantly, when we're taking these samples, bacteria causing a UTI or bacterial contamination will produce alkaline urine. And interestingly, during sleep, decreased breathing, hopefully people aren't doing lots of hard, heavy breathing while sleeping, will cause respiratory acidosis. This is a normal state. So what this means, though, is when we get the first urine sample of the day, because there's a lot of schools of thought that say when you're measuring acidosis within the body, you get the first urine of the day. If you use the first urine of the day, because of the decreased pulmonary ventilation, you're actually going to see it's always acidic. Okay? It's always acidic, so we actually look at the second urine of the day. I've had practitioners ask me, well, I have patients who wake up at 3 o'clock and go to the toilet, 5 o'clock and go to the toilet, 7 o'clock, and then they're up for the day. Which one's the second urine of the day? The answer is, once they are awake and up and moving about. Okay? If they're going back to sleep after, that is not classified as the first urine of the day. Okay? It's that simple. Saliva pH. Because very often Urinary pH shows what the body is dumping. Saliva pH, though, shows how the body is buffering acid. As I'm sure you're all aware, saliva is primarily actually drawn from lymphatic fluid near the lung. And patients that have low urinary pH show that they're dumping lots of acid. Of course, that means, therefore, they must have acids dumped. So we assume there's some level of acidosis. But when we combine it with salivary pH of above 7, we're seeing that the body is attempting to buffer that acid. Okay, so when we see people with a urinary pH of, say, 5.5 and a saliva pH of somewhere in the 7s, it actually indicates that the body, is in fact buffering acid. And what does it buffer with? Minerals. Okay, the body will always use minerals to buffer that. We'll look at that in a few slides from here. A number of schools of thought, though, also actually state that someone is alkaline and healthy if their saliva is above pH 7. However, what we know is that salivary amylase, one of the enzymes of digestion, will not function optimally. Its optimal pH range is anywhere between pH 7, which is neutral, down to about pH 1.5. Because where does salivary amylase wind up? Down in the acid pit of the stomach. There's another thing that actually occurs, though. If I'm actually swallowing an alkaline substance hour after hour, what's likely to happen to the acid in my stomach? Well, when we combine an alkaline substance and an acidic substance, we get something called neutralization. If we combine a weak acid and a strong acid, we get dilution of the acid. Neutralization will create a far greater pH shift, or make that acid much, much, much less acidic than if you simply add a weak acid to it.